Hello, it's Krista with the Wildflower Walk in the Woods, segment number 2. We're back here again in the woods behind my house in Big Bone, Kentucky. We're going to look at 3 new wildflowers today. All right, our first flower today, well, unfortunately the flower is gone. But this plant right here, our flowering plant, is called twin leaf. And if you take a look at the leaves, you can kind of see why. The leaves are kind of mirrored copies of one another almost looks like a butterfly or one of those big elephant ears. The twin leaf is a spring ephemeral. That's our new vocabulary word for the day. Ephemeral is something that lasts for a short time. And in botany, in terms of wildflowers, an ephemeral will bloom before the leaves flush out on the trees. And it will only usually be in bloom for a day or two. So ephemerals, you got to catch them at the right time and then you miss them. That's kind of what happened with this flower. I spotted it a couple weeks ago, took a picture of it with my phone, and then when we came back we had a couple days of non-cooperative weather. So when we came back to film, the flower had actually few petals were left on it, and then it pretty much had vanished a day later. But the plant is growing. It's a lot more. When it was flowering, the leaves were about the size of these leaves down here. By the way, I have a new film crew today. Usually my daughter Macy films, Katie edits. My kids decided to leave me today and go horseback riding, so we have my husband Mark filming today.
Hello.
With twin leaves, the flowers will actually open before the leaves are fully emerged. They were kind of closed when we had a flower. The flower has about 8 petals, 8 white petals, and then the leaves will continue to grow with the fruit. So this is how I know that this one did flower. So the fruit of this plant, it's kind of pod-like almost, and I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like a hinged piece on there. This is actually referred to as a hinged lid, and when this is fully mature, it'll pop open and then the seeds will come out and disperse. Amazingly, the seeds by this plant are moved around by ants, of all things. So this is one of the really cool things. So if you guys have ever been to the 4-H Center for Environmental Education, out there I teach the trees class. Ecology is really kind of the thing I'm really into. And ecology is basically, to say it as simply as possible, it's how everything works out here together. And we'll investigate that with another flower we're going to look at today. But this plant has adapted to where this will pop open, seeds will go, and it has to take ants to move them around. So if I were going to do what's called reading the landscape, I would look at this area. We've got one over here, then we have this other one growing over here. I don't see any others, and like I said, I've been back at this area a couple times looking to see if we had any new ones to pop up, because I really wanted to get a shot at the flower for you. Some other facts about this plant that I found were really kind of cool. It's not common. It is something that is found in the bluegrass area of Kentucky, which is where we live, but they're not something that you're going to see a ton of. As I can say, this is the first time I've ever actually have seen one. So kind of cool. Another fact, so this will be your, I guess your Jeopardy fact of the day. The scientific name for this plant is Jeffersonia diphylla. And if Jeffersonia kind of rings a bell, think of our former president, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, I heard that he was a botanist. I know, let me look at my notes here, he had a good friend that was a botanist, Benjamin Smith Barton. And Benjamin Smith Barton is actually the botanist who named this particular flower, the Jeffersonia diphylla, and this is one that was growing in the gardens at Monticello. So that's some of the research that I found out about this. Last fact about this is that it likes rich limestone soils, which, guess what, we have abundance of here in Northern Kentucky. Great. The next flower that we're going to take a look at today is called blue phlox, and you can kind of see a cluster of it right here. There's another cluster up there a little bit further, and this is how this flower grows. It tends to grow in little clusters like that. Ironically, so the name is blue phlox, and the flowers are more of a purple color, but it can be purple, lavender, or white. This particular flower is widespread. You can find it throughout the state of Kentucky, and I'm not real sure geographically where else in the United States, but I know that you can also find it in Europe. We're going to take a minute to look at the anatomy of this flower. If you notice, there's this long, slender tube that kind of holds the petals out like, oh, flower, here I am. This is actually called a corolla tube. So yes, corolla, just like the car. And the corolla tube is kind of cool when you investigate what it is and why it's there and all that. Again, ecology kind of plays a part in this particular flower. If you think about the flower's purposes out here in the woods, you know, flowers want to make more flowers. They make seeds that will make more flowers. In order for that to happen, though, the flower itself has to be pollinated. And you probably heard about, you know, we've heard butterflies and bees and sometimes flies and a whole list of insects, and some are even wind pollinated. This corolla tube kind of limits what kind of insects are able to do the pollination of a flower like this. So I want you to think about butterflies. I've got a little toy butterfly here. This isn't a great example, but you can kind of see, and if you've ever seen butterflies before when they've been on flowers, there's this long, thin, kind of almost like tube-like structure on the butterfly that curls up, makes a coil. This is called a proboscis, and this is a characteristic of butterflies. This is how they are able to get to the nectar of flowers. Well, think about this. Would that be a benefit when you're talking about a flower like this that has a corolla tube? Would this be a benefit? Would this be something that would allow you to get the nectar out of this flower? You bet. So butterflies, along with moths, skippers, and long-winged bees, they are the only type of insects that are able to pollinate blue phlox. So kind of cool from an ecology standpoint. And that is our study of blue phlox today. We're going to move on to our next flower. All right, we're going to take a look at our last flower today. Our last flower is called the cream violet. So as you can see, the cream violet looks like a typical violet. Five petals. We're used to seeing the purple variety. This one is kind of an off-white, hence the name cream violet. There are some purple streaks on a couple of the petals. There's also some little hairs inside as well. Cream violet does not have any yellow in the center. There are a couple species of white colored violets that do, and that's how you can tell them apart. The leaves on the cream violet, I don't know how well they'll show up on the computer, but they are toothed, and they're kind of a heart shape. And that's kind of a characteristic of a lot of different violets. We haven't really talked much about leaves, but when I say toothed or serrated, that means instead of it just having a smooth edge, it almost looks like somebody cut it with a pair of jagged scissors. Sometimes it feels rough if you run your finger across it. Cream violet wood is found statewide in Kentucky, and it likes a moist wooded area, which is exactly where we're at right now. So in review, today we learned about 3 new wildflowers. We learned about twin leaf, blue phlox, and cream violet. So what can we do now? Remember in segment 1, we talked about wildflower journaling. This can be photographs or just writing down the dates and where you found flowers. We also talked about making some flowers out of paper, just some materials that you can find at home. Here's our example of cream violet, and I do want to show you the leaf on the cream violet, because after we got back and we did some editing, you really couldn't see the edge of the leaf. The edge is what we call serrated, and which means that it's rough. We also learned a couple new terms today. We learned about the corolla tube, and we also learned about ecology. So we will, at the end of the segment, attach some of the sources that I looked at to find some of my information. There's also a couple places that you can look to find more if you're interested in learning more about wildflowers. Bye for now.